Hello and welcome to this AimHi Live. Today is very exciting because today we've got an incredible, inspiring guest joining us. His name is Rob Hopkins, and he has done some of the most amazing things to turn around towns into self-sufficient communities, towns that can properly look after themselves, towns that have a much smaller environmental impact. He's such a brilliant human being, and I'm so excited to welcome him here. I'm going to bring him on screen now so that you can all say hi. Here is Rob.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you all.
Everyone's saying hi, Rob. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to the pictures that we're going to show. So the topic of today is going to be: can we imagine a better future, and why does it matter that we do? Now, before we get going, can anyone see what this image is? What do people think is going on here? Miz is saying, is that from the film 2012? And lots of people are still saying hi, Rob. So one person has recognized that this is New York underwater. Rob, do you wanna take it away and start?
Yeah, well, hi, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
While Rob's doing sound muting, this is a picture of New York. Interesting fact about New York. I think this is true. I think that New York has the highest density of peregrine falcon birds of any place in the entire world, including natural areas, because the peregrine falcons find it so easy to hunt the pigeons. Peregrine falcons, for those who don't know, are like these incredibly speedy birds that kind of dive attack the pigeons and other birds in New York, and I think they use the updrafts. Anyway, maybe Rob knows more about this. Anyway, Rob, I'll let you go back.
Thank you. I know nothing about that at all, I have to say. So the reason I wanted to start with showing you this picture is because what we want to talk about today is how important imagination is in thinking about the future. Because so often when we try and think about the future, we see images like this. And often as activists who are trying to inspire, I don't know how many of you who are there today might have been part of the school strikes for climate. How many of you might have been inspired by Greta Thunberg and been part of those strikes? All very often the imagery that we use to try and inspire people to take part in this is images like this. And I don't know about you, but when I look at an image like that, it doesn't necessarily inspire me to do things. It tends to make me feel like the future looks pretty dreadful, and it tends to make me feel a bit hopeless. And as Mia says, it's terrifying. And I think that when we are terrified and we're in a state like that, it's not the best place to start from in terms of really doing something about a big challenge like the climate emergency. So what I want to do in this workshop is to try and bring in some different thinking and to give you some different kind of thinking tools for how we might approach this. So this is going to be not just me talking for the whole time. There's a couple of things I'm going to invite you to do. So the first one of those is that I'm going to give you a minute and a half, and I'm going to show you an object. And in that minute and a half, I'd like you to think of as many alternative uses for that object as you can. Now, this is not school. There is no right answer. Any answer is completely acceptable. They can be completely ridiculous. You don't have to be thinking, could I patent that idea? Or whatever. You're just putting out ideas, okay? And you don't have to write them down, but if you want to, you can. And at the end of it, I'll ask you to just choose 2 or 3 ideas that most inspired you. Okay, so just allow your imagination to really go. It could be a this, it could be a that, it could be a that, and just go with that. Okay, so I can give you a minute and a half. It starts now, and your object is a paper cup, something that you see on a regular kind of an occasion. So you have a minute and a half now. Think of as many uses as you can. Go.
Rob, while people are thinking of a thing, have you ever heard of have you ever seen what happens to a polystyrene cup? If there's like inflated polystyrene cups that
Oh yeah,
people
yeah,
used
yeah.
to. You ever heard about what happens? I mean, I'm sure you can guess. What happens to one of those if you take it to the bottom of the ocean? If you attach it to a rock and then take it to...
They just get... No, I've got no idea. I imagine they break into smaller and smaller pieces.
No, they get compressed by the pressure of the ocean, and then they come up as a tiny little mini cup.
Wow.
Anyway, let's stop distracting people from there. Okay,
There's some good ideas coming in here already.
so Maddie's saying bin. Seen some people turn cups into lamps.
An abacus.
Ooh, an abacus. Home for an ant. A single ant. Moving in.
Very spacious home for a single ant.
A seat for an ant. Ooh, building block. I like that. Sean and Toast saying a coin jar. MLP Wales is saying home for insects. Closing public
Seat.
Ant mansion.
And it could also be a cup. This is true. Can't really argue with that. Brilliant. Thank you. Thanks, Max. I'll adopt that one. Okay, so any last suggestions? Do write them down here. You could use it to drink from. Sean, very, very good radical suggestion. A very small shoe. What's that? Oh, drum. I was trying to figure out what that image was. Food.
No one
I think
said
if Joe invites you
telecommunications.
round to his house for supper, you might want to think twice about that.
Brainstorming exercise tool. Great from Big.
Well, thank you so much. So this is an exercise that I do with all kinds of different groups, and I often do this as part of talks that I do. And the reason is because it's brilliant at what's called divergent thinking. There's two different kinds of thinking we do. There's convergent thinking, where we try and problem solve and we focus in down on a problem. And there's divergent thinking, which is where we ask what if, and we try and think big and kind of playful and imaginative like that. And we need both of those things equally. There's research that was done a few years ago where they found that actually, while we're very good at the kind of convergent thinking, that divergent thinking, that ability to go, oh, what if we put that together with that? What if we mix that with that? Has been declining for the last 20 years or so. And that's really important because we need to be able to, because that's fundamental to our imagination. And imagination is an extraordinary thing. There's researchers do experiments. So you take a group of people, you divide them in half of those people sit down in front of a piano and they practice a sequence of notes. And then the other half of people sit down in front of a piano, but they're not allowed to touch it. And they just have to sit and imagine that they're playing those sequence of notes. And after 2 weeks, they're almost as good as each other. It's an extraordinary thing. And so if human imagination is declining, then that's really, really powerful. If we're not really teaching imagination in school, if we tend to always present problems as always having a solution rather than just saying, so what do you think? And how could we imagine our way through this? And my work for the last 20 years or something has been around climate change and what we can do as communities around climate change, what you can do if you get together with your friends, if you get together with your neighbors and you start something. Obviously, the government has to do lots and lots of things, and business has to do lots of things. And as individuals, we can do lots of things like eat less meat and that kind of thing and fly less. But at the same time, as communities, there's a lot that we can do. And that's really been the bit that I've been very involved in exploring. And for me, that's fundamentally about imagination, because we need to be able to imagine a different world before we can create it. And for me, that's really about longing. How do you create longing for the world to be different? And that's a great work of the imagination. So the second exercise that I would like to do with you is something that I think will go down in the history of AimHi as one of the most seminal, exciting moments that ever happened, which is that we are going to attempt here the first act of mass time travel in the history of AimHi and possibly even of the internet. This is going to. I've got my time machine here, which I brought along specifically for the occasion, and the invitation is that I'm going to ask you to close your eyes, to make yourself comfortable, and to close your eyes. And we are going to use our time machine to travel forward in time. Okay, so if you can just get yourself comfortable, close your eyes. And what we're going to do is in a moment, Matthew is going to turn on our time machine. And we're going to travel forward to 2030, so just 10 years into the future. But I'd like you to imagine that the 10 years between 2020 and 2030, inspired partly by the school strikes and Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion and a whole load of things around the world, was a time of the most phenomenal change. And all of the things that you've read about and heard about and learned about in school about what a low carbon future would be like have happened. It's been a time of the most extraordinary transformation. And in a moment, we're going to turn on the time machine and you will hear a sound which will be for you to imagine that you are leaving now and traveling and then landing into the world of 2030. And then we'll just sit for a moment in silence and just allow your imagination in a multi-sensory way to take you around. So what does that future smell like, sound like, feel like, and look like? And to just go for a walk around the streets of the future in your imagination.
Can everyone now hear the sound of the time machine? You should be able to.
So then keep your eyes closed and we'll just go for a walk.
That's it. We're through. We're here.
I said, so just take this minute just to walk around in your imagination, maybe the streets around where you live, and just see what you see and hear and experience.
I also admire the effort from some people to continue typing with their eyes closed. You can see a lot of nonsense entering the thread.
And if you have anything that you'd like to share or anything that you see or anything that you've experienced, do write it down in the chat. Just share what you saw or felt or what came to mind when you sort of landed into that future. Loads of stars.
Wow, Chloe's had like a really beautiful vision about the whole earth was a massive forest and all the houses were up in the sky. Posey Chapman's late, but Posey, we are talking about can we imagine a better future with guest Rob Hopkins, who's just taken us on a journey into the future, so welcome to the future. Jess saw loads of people and then a huge building that stretched for miles.
Well, thank you all so much for doing that and for your amazing ability to type with your eyes closed. I've done this exercise with large groups of people and with small groups of people, and I did it in a hall in Belgium with 1,500 people, and I've done it with really small groups as well. And it's really can be a really powerful thing, because actually very often we don't allow ourselves to imagine the future. So somebody said in here something about lots of dead people or, there's those kind of nightmare scenarios of the future. Matthew, do you want to put up the next pictures? So this is an artist called James McKee, who lives in Leeds, who does graphic novels. And he's kind of the man who draws the future. And he tries to draw the future as it could be if we did everything that we could possibly do. So the one on the left is the most biodiverse future imaginable. If we gave our cities over to wildlife and to nature, what would it actually be like? How could that be? And then the other one is, what would it be like if we gave over huge amounts of our cities to growing food? How would it be to live in a street that was full of food being growing, and kids walk to school through down streets with food being grown? If that was a completely part of our culture, food grew up the sides of buildings, it grew on balconies, and we had and that was the fabric of our cities. It's entirely possible. At the moment, we give so much of the land in our cities over to cars. In Los Angeles, 2/3 of the surface area of Los Angeles is dedicated to cars. And as we're seeing now a big push in lots and lots of cities to try and have less cars in cities, that makes up a lot of space for something to happen. Already in Paris, the mayor of Paris, who's been reducing the number of cars in Paris, is finding there are so many underground car parks in Paris, they just don't know what to do with them all. So they're using them to grow mushrooms and grow salads and store wine and all sorts of different stuff. So we can be looking at the spaces in our cities in very different ways. There's a poet who once said, "The future must enter into you a long time before it happens." And that's why I like to do that time machine exercise with groups. And images like this allow the future to sort of arrive in us first and make so much more likely that we're going to go there. If we need to, if we're going to go on holiday somewhere, a really enticing brochure is going to make it far more likely than we're going to go there than if someone just tells us a story about the most horrendous holiday they had there once. Can I have my next picture, please?
Oh, you can. Yeah, I was just labeling this deer on a bike.
You're getting very artistic there.
So clearly,
so part of why this matters as well is that actually being optimistic about the future is really good for you. Is really good for your health. So people who are optimists, research shows that people who are optimists live longer. People who are optimists tend to be healthier. And what fear does when we're really scared about the future is that the part of our brain, which is what we need to be imaginative, shrinks. And when that happens, we lose that sense that the future could be something else. And the beautiful thing for me is, you might be sitting there thinking, yeah, well, Rob, this is all very nice, but actually, that's not how the world works. And what I'd like to share with you is that I get to visit loads and loads of places where amazing things are happening. And this kind of future that's in those drawings is already being built in lots of different places. And this is a place that I visited in France called Montsartou, which is a place in the south of France, where in France, the government said 20% of all the food in schools should be organic. And in Montsartou, they said, well, if 20% is better than 0%, why are we stopping at 20%? Shouldn't it be 100%? So if you went to school in Montsartou, 100% of all the food in the schools is now organic food, and 70% of it is grown in this garden on the edge of the town, where the local government bought this land. It was going to be built with houses, and they bought the land and turned it into a garden. I think there's another picture of that as well.
There is indeed.
Showing the food being grown. And it was amazing. Yeah, there we go. So they grew the biggest chard I've ever seen. And I was so excited about it. And for me, this is something where if we can think about the future in a way that's optimistic and practical and with a sense of courage and bravery that we can reimagine stuff, solutions like this are a win-win-win-win-win-win solution. They're good for public health. They're good for mental health. They're good for bees and butterflies and wildlife. They're good for the local economy. They found in the school that it started to change the behavior of families at the school. They started to buy more local produce, buy more organic produce. The kids were involved in cooking the food. This could happen absolutely everywhere. There's really no reason why we have to have the sort of thing that we have at the moment in a lot of schools. We could be looking at a completely different system. Okay, can I have the next thing?
You can indeed. There's a lot of people saying, wow, really appreciating what you're saying.
Yeah, good. Fabulous. For me, I've spent years going around with this kind of vision in my head about how the future could be. And to actually go somewhere where it's already happening, I always find really emotional, I was really moved being there. It was extraordinary. So this is an exercise I want to tell you about that we developed in the transition movement, which I'll talk a bit more about in a little bit, which is called Transition Town Anywhere. So when you closed your eyes, you may have come up with a vision of the future that felt really beautiful and desirable and like the kind of future you'd like to grow up into. So that can just stay as a dream, or you can take it to the next step, which is like this exercise where you imagine you step into 2030, you're in a big hall with maybe 300 people, 400 people, and then you imagine, well, what am I doing? What's my role in this future? And then you meet other people who share the thing that you're passionate about, and then you build it physically, literally, in 3 dimensions, using cardboard and bamboo and sticky tape and pens, and then you live in it, and then you play in it. It's absolutely wonderful. Can we have the next picture there? This is when we did this exercise last October in London at Battersea Arts Centre. It was just fabulous. And these 2 young men here, they built the public transportation system for Transition Town Anywhere. Now, that might look to you like a few chairs and a bit of cardboard and some string. They could tell you everything about how that public transport system worked, what the tickets looked like, what it ran on, where it went. Everything about it was completely formed in their imagination. There is something really powerful about playing the future before you actually then are able to create it. It puts this sort of, what did I say? The future must enter into you a long time before it happens. And this exercise allows you to play the future. In my town, I'm involved in a brewery that I started here. And that came about the very first time we did this exercise in 2012, where I was with another group of people and we played making a brewery and a mill and a brewery, a bakery and a mill in the same building. And we just thought this was the most brilliant idea. And for 3 hours, we played this. And I could tell you all the beers that we made, what they were called, how our education program worked, everything about it. Last year, we turned that business into a community-owned business. We raised £180,000 of community investment. Everybody who invested became an owner. And when people said, but Rob, how do you know that will work? What makes you think that will work? And I would say, I know it will work because I played it. I absolutely know it will work because I played it. And if we can play at a different future first, it makes the most enormous difference. Okay, next.
Okay, next image. Here we go.
As if by magic, in comes another picture. So what would it be like if school, I don't know about you, maybe it's changed a lot since I was a kid, and it'd be interesting if you just put a Y or an N for yes or no in the chat box. But do you feel like school in 2020 is something that really values and welcomes and nurtures and encourages your imagination? That where you feel like it allows you to look at the world and feel like anything is possible? And that school itself is something where your imagination is always being stretched and pulled and open up to new possibilities. I'm getting a few ends and a few not reallys there. Certainly wasn't my experience of school at all. In Finland, it absolutely does. And the part of the reason it does in Finland is because they don't do tests. And homeschooling, that would help. In Finland, they don't do tests and they just play until they're 7. So this is a school that I went to go and visit in France, which is a school based in the middle of an amazing kind of permaculture project, surrounded by agroforestry and food gardening, and they have horse riding. Learn with subjects, they learn with projects, they have a garden where they grow food. It was just phenomenal. And I'm really always interested in trying to find those models of different kinds of education. And in the book, there's a whole chapter of different people taking different approaches to how education could be. Okay, next one.
There are some quite interesting comments coming in as well about ideas about school.
Yes.
School is outdated because it's based on the ideas that everyone is going to work in a factory.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that we have an education system now where there are kids who take days off school from stress at the age of 4 because the testing has already begun at that stage is really, really heartbreaking, I think. And it's very much about obedience. Yeah, I completely agree.
I think I got so lucky with school. I went to school in the north, and the pressure was just so low. I moved to the south, and yeah, I see how intense it is, even just that regional shift. Anyway, sorry, carry on.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is a man, I think one of the things that's really important in this idea of, okay, if we are able to allow ourselves to imagine a different future that works in a different way, and then we are able to find different ways of making it a reality. One of the things that's really important to that is our ability to tell stories. So that vision, if you imagined something at the beginning that to you felt really hopeful and optimistic and positive and possible, how would you then tell people about that? How would you bring alive for you that picture that you conjured in your imagination? How would you bring that into conversation with other people and explain it? And storytelling, becoming good at telling stories about that is really important. This man here in the picture, he works for the Swedish government, and his job title is Chief Storyteller for the Swedish government. And his job description is to bring to life the day-to-day realities of living in a low-carbon future. So that's what he does. He tells stories about how would it be? What would it be like to wake up in a world where we used so much less fossil fuels, but life was so much better as a result? Chief storyteller. Everybody's school should have a chief storyteller. Every organization, every government, we should all be capable of being a chief storyteller who can bring that kind of future to life. It feels to me like one of the most important skills we need to nurture. And when all we do is tell really depressing stories about the future, like that picture I showed you at the beginning, we shut that possibility down. Okay? No, it's not Tim Franklin. It's Per Gronqvist. Okay, can I have my next one thing? Okay, so I want to tell you a couple of stories, talking about storytelling. I want to tell you a couple of stories. So I started a movement about 13 years ago called the Transition Movement, which is about what can you and I, in the place where we live, do to get started? How do we look at the people that we have, the resources that we have, and just get started? So this is a story from London, in South London. This is in Tooting. And in Tooting, in London, some of you might live in Tooting, there's a big, busy road, one of London's main roads, and lots of shops. There's nowhere that's really like a village green or a town square or something like that. So Transition Town Tooting, who are the local group there, they said, well, there's one place that could be that, which is here, which is a bus turning circle. So this place is normally just full of buses, just sitting here all day waiting to be called to go somewhere. Usually they leave their engine running, so the air quality here is horrible for the poor people who live in these houses. Nobody loves this place, right? This is a pretty sort of, people just walk past this place. They have no reason ever to stop here. So Transition Town Tooting said, right, what if that was our village green? And rather than just asking that question, if you want to move on to the next picture, they ran a day called the Tooting Twirl, where they took that space over and they filled it with flowers and music and coffee. They put real lawn down onto the street. There were the local restaurants gave food, gave away food for nothing for people. So people spent the whole day there living as though this was already their village green. It was just fantastic. And I spent the whole day there, and I noticed how the conversation changed over the day to say, it moved from, if this was our village green, to when this is our village green. So somewhere, because they asked a really great what if question, somewhere underneath, it was like the tectonic plates of possibility started to move. And people looked at that place in a completely different way. And it felt like it was now inevitable that it would kind of work that way. So asking a really good what if question is really, really powerful. Okay, next one. So there's the second what if story I want to tell you, because I feel like that ability to ask really good what if questions is so, so important. This is in Belgium, in a place called Liège, which is a city in Belgium. And And about 5 years ago, I went there, and the transition group there in Liège, they came up with a question, which was, what if in a generation's time, the majority of food eaten in Liège came from the land closest to Liège? Just beautiful, beautiful question. They called it the food belt. The Liège food belt is the name of the project. So when I went there, it was just an idea. It was just a great question, and a question that sort of invited people to step in and say, oh, I've got a bit of that. I've got a bit of that. And I went to a big event where they launched the idea, and they had farmers and chefs and so on, and lots of different people there. And then I went home, and then I didn't hear anything for 4 years. And last April, I went back to Liège. In that time, in those 4 years, they had started 21 new cooperatives, so new businesses, run as cooperatives, excuse me. They had raised 5 million euros of investment from local people in the city. People, rather than putting their money in the bank, were putting their money into new businesses starting up in the city. Sorry, I've got a frog in my throat. They had started a farm, they'd started 2 vineyards, they'd started a brewery, they started a shop here called the Small Producers, right in the middle of the town, selling food from local farmers. Then after 6 months, that was doing so well, they opened a second. They now have 4, and the first one has moved and has doubled in size. I met the mayor of Liège, who said, well, we used to say we wanted to be a smart city, but now we want to be a transition city. This is now the story of our city. And we see our role as a local government as just being to get out of the way and to remove all the blockages, all the obstacles to this from happening. And again, like in the place I mentioned before, as somebody who has spent the last 12, 13, 14 years with this vision that I'm trying to kind of excite people about in Liège, I'm in that world. I'm having my lunch in that world. I'm going into a shop where this is already up and running and already exists. It's just absolutely wonderful. So, but both of these projects started with a what if question, a really good what if question. And Max asked, surely it's kind of expensive to buy food. Actually, the thing that was really fascinating in those shops that they had set up in the center of Liège was that actually the food was, the vegetables were cheaper than the supermarket. And the people in that shop weren't kind of sort of white middle class sort of organic food buying people. It was Moroccan, Turkish immigrants from all over the place. It was really, really fascinating. So
that's amazing.
Lots of food at home, good man. So for me, it's like this is not like it isn't completely fictitious. This already exists, and it exists because people step up and go, right, okay, let's do this. We're not going to wait anymore. We're going to get on and do it. Okay, could I have the next picture?
Can indeed. There's some people saying we've run out of time. That might be because we posted this might be because you're used to our lessons always being 30 to 40 minutes, but this one's running longer, so we haven't run out of time.
Okay. Well, I'll be about another 5 minutes anyway, and then we'll have lots of conversation.
But no rush. This is great.
Well, this is something in Bologna in Italy, which I don't know if any of you have ever been to Bologna, one of the most gorgeous cities I've ever been to, and the local government in Bologna created something called a Civic Imagination office, because they felt like one of the main things they needed to do was to fire up and excite the imagination of people in Bologna. So in 6 areas in the city, they have what they call an imagination lab. And they run lots of events where they invite people's ideas, people's what-if questions, people's visions for the future. And then when people come up with an idea, they say, that's good, okay, we'll meet you halfway. We'll meet you in the middle and we'll make that happen. We'll make a pact that will mean that will happen. So there are places in the world where there are people who are decision makers who are saying, no, imagination is really, really important here. Okay, next one. Yes, so this is the last thing I wanted to show you, I think, which is basically just to say, so the thing that I've been involved with for the last 12, 13 years is transition. And lots of places have transition groups. And you could, if you had a look at transitionnetwork.org, there's a bit at the top of the page which says transition near me. And if you put in your postcodes, you can find what's happening to you, who your local group is. But this is basically people, and there are transition groups that have set up in universities and I think in schools as well. And it's people coming together and just getting started to build a future like that. And it can be small projects like making a food garden in your street, or it can be bigger things like big tree plantings, or bigger things like setting up community energy companies, or really ambitious things like they're doing in Liège. The point is that idea, that imagining of the future that you had in your head at the beginning of this, how might you take that? And even in a small little place, it might be in your garden, it might be in front of your house, it might be in a little corner of your school. Just start to make something where the people can see and smell and taste that allows them to think about the future differently. And those stories that I told you from Tooting, from Liège, I could stay on this call for the next 24 hours and just tell you story after story after story after story of things like that happen all around the world. There is so much like this that is happening, and actually, what's most important about that stuff is it gives people a taste now of something that they can actually see and experience. So, just to finish, really, I just would say, it feels to me like if we want to inspire people about creating a better future, the way that we do it is through creating and sharing a really powerful vision of how it would be if it turned out okay. What would it be like? What would it smell like, sound like? And then we take that and we start to ground that into reality, because when we awaken people's imagination, then anything is possible, much, much more so than if we just tried to terrify them with pictures of New York under 40 meters of water. Anyway, thank you so much. And I don't know if you have any questions. We have some time for questions and conversations if there's anything that you're wondering a bit more about. And and if you want to find out anything more about what I do, there's a couple of web links there. And I just started a new podcast, which you might find interesting too.
I saw that there were a couple of people in the chat who are already reading this book, which is great.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's very good.
Looks like it. But it is a fantastic book if anyone wants to get it. Okay, so Miz is asking, how did you get into this?
That's a good question. How did I get into this? Well, when I was about 20, I came across something called permaculture, which is a kind of a design system, how you design sustainable systems based on looking at how nature works, which is just the most fascinating thing. And it's had this concept of earth repair, which was this idea that actually we can put it all back together again. You know, if we understand it right, we can sort this out. And that was something that really inspired me hugely. So I've always been very inspired by kind of practical, let's just do things kind of approaches. I kind of grew up with punk, which also had that very kind of do-it-yourself culture, which really inspired me a lot. And then I've just been doing it, really.
Fantastic. But so before we give you the next question, I just want to say, just because I know that some people have to go, this is one that was not in the schedule before, that is from a new teacher we've got coming up at 4 p.m. So that's in 2 and a bit hours, from Hannah Bolland, who's going to talk about what is cancer. She's a doctor at Oxford University and she's amazing. So do come along for that. And also, this is what's coming up later in the week. I'm doing What's the Science of Deja Vu? What's the Science of Deja Vu? But check out the calendar and do go to our website to see the lessons that are coming up next. And now I'm going to go back to all the questions, because there's loads of great questions coming in. Ooh, wow, Sean on Toast has written an amazingly long comment. Let's see what Sean said. Just want to say thank you to everyone in these live streams for the great community. Oh, Sean, this is so nice. I'm going to keep that comment. But anyway, sorry, let's go back to questions from Rob. So Max has asked a question, isn't there a danger that people start imagining and start to think that the future is going to fix itself?
I think I would always make it really, really clear that actually, if imagination just remains as imagination, then it's really fairly pointless, really. In this context, anyway, you know, that we have to reimagine. We have to imagine while we build, and we have to always do both. And so all of the kind of big imagining projects that we do with communities and stuff are always in the context of what are we going to do about it. You know, this is not a time for just sort of sitting and contemplating our tummy buttons. It's really a time for really inspired action, but that starts with imagination. And the future is not going to fix itself. We have to. It will require us to reimagine and rebuild how our energy system works, how our food system works, how our economic system works. And Naomi Klein, who's one of the most brilliant kind of commentators on climate change, she once said, there are no non-radical solutions left. And the beautiful thing about imagination is that it thrives when it has limits. So if I said to you now, Matthew, tell me a story, might be, well, I don't know, but if I said, tell me a story about a mouse who lives under that piano behind you and he has a little blue hat and this little tiny little piano all of his own, then I've kind of put limits around the story, and it makes it much, much easier for us to tell stories about. And so when we look at the future, which is a future with less resources and where we have to use less fossil fuels, we can either look at that and fight against that and say, no, 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 no. Or if we can bring our imagination, the most imaginative people I meet are the people who are looking at those crises and saying, right, what do we do about it? Great, okay, we recognize there are these limits.
Sorry, do carry on. I was just writing this amazing Naomi Klein quote down.
Okay. Where can you get the book? I think you can get it all the different places online. You can get books from Waterstones. Don't buy Amazon though, because they're horrible. But anywhere other than Amazon, you can buy it from, I think. You don't care about the future. Well, that is the big issue, and it seems extraordinary. It seems an extraordinary question to even have to ask, doesn't it? Why would anybody be a leader of anywhere if they didn't care about the future? But it does seem that we have some of those, not too far from home and further afield. But actually, my sense is that, and certainly the opinion polls would really suggest that actually we are seeing a big shift in public opinion around the need for climate change. What we're seeing now as we emerge, hopefully, out of coronavirus, after a time when that exercise that I did with you at the beginning, every time I do that with big groups of people, the first things people say is the bird song was a lot louder, there were a lot less cars, the air smelt really clean and amazing, and I felt part of a really connected community of people who are looking out for each other. 3 months ago, doing that exercise, that felt like quite a kind of an idealistic thing to be imagining. Actually, after the last few weeks, chances are if you step out of your door now, it's a lot more like that than it was before. So I feel like actually the question now is how we build forward from that. And what we're seeing around the world is lots of cities where they are saying, we're not going to go back to how we were, we're going to build forward. Milan are putting in 22 miles of new cycle tracks. London is putting in a lot of new, restricting car access to cities. We have to build forward from this, because once you've had 2 months of living with air smelling as clean as it has now and the bird song as loud as it has, we don't want to give that up. We want to build forward from this and to make something better.
Sean on Toast saying, got a question, can recycling save us? Sean, you know full well that that's the live on Monday. And the full answer will come later.
Well, I won't preempt that one then. I do want to know what freedom tastes like, so I might have to come along for that one.
But anyway, I think that is all the questions. There's a really nice comment there from someone out there who said, we got to try to better the future, even if we have a low chance to succeed, because we don't try. If sure won't better itself. And imagination is like a blueprint to increase the odds. I think with imagination,
Beautiful.
We have a good chance to succeed. I think as long as we all work hard on it. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. And thank you as well to Rob. You have been amazing, and it's been such a pleasure and a privilege to have you on. Do let us know in the comments if you enjoyed this, if you want to see more of these guest lives, and also do check out Rob's book and his podcast as well, and read more about him and his work, because he is a very inspiring figure, and it has been something that we always really wanted to do when we were setting up this school, is to help to link you guys to people like Rob, so that you can be exposed to people like him who are doing incredible things to try and change the world for the better. So I hope you've enjoyed it. All right, farewell. Bye all.